Mobile Testing Methodology, presented by Gian Wild. Ali Bytes, 2021.
Today I'm talking about mobile accessibility, and I want to start by talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. This is an example here. It's Jamie Oliver's recipes, and when you first open the app, it throws you to a separate app, your video player app on your phone, which automatically plays, and they've kind of grayed out all the buttons and all that kind of stuff. So that fails. Pause, stop, hide can be very confusing for users. Another one that we still see a lot actually is failure here against WCAG 2 success criterion 1.4.3 contrast minimum. As you can see, the thing that you're most likely to use when you go to an Amazon page, the search bar, is grey text on a grey background, and a lot of people miss that. This here is a failure of 3.3.1 error identification and error suggestion. This is Netflix. I would often, when I travel, get this error, which says error. That's it. Doesn't say anything else. And that's not particularly helpful. And then we see other things like failure of here of 1.4.4 resize text. This is ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And on the left, you have small text. And on the right, you have large text. The left is the smallest text you can go. The right is the largest text you can go. So we're talking about, 6 point on the left and probably about 12 point on the right. So yes, that is 200% of each other, but it's not 200% of the normal text size. So that fails that resize text. And of course, the problem here is that these two images are of small text on the left and large text on the right, but they actually look exactly the same, because if you scroll up to the top, the header, the article title, the caption, the author, they're all in the same size text, whether you've chosen large text or small text. So there are a few things that you can identify on mobile. You've seen a few of them here if you're looking at WCAG 2. But basically what we found as an industry is that everyone who was running an accessibility company had come up with their own mobile testing methodology, and they're all a little bit different. So basically the initial mobile accessibility testing methodology was an amalgamation of the accepted mobile accessibility testing standards from around the world and other accessibility companies to develop an overall methodology that could be used. So we need to kind of take a step back and talk about why WCAG 2 isn't enough for mobile. So WCAG 2 success criteria are applicable to mobile. However, not all aspects of mobile accessibility are specifically covered by WCAG 2. For example, although WCAG 2 requires sites to be accessible to the keyboard user, it does not specify that it should also be accessible to the touchscreen user. Now, WCAG 2.1 does build on this and addresses more criteria related to touchscreens, such as pointer gestures and sensors, but it still doesn't cover all the user needs related to mobile accessibility. Mobile accessibility features are much more detailed than what you get on desktop. There are native screen readers like TalkBack for Android, Narrator for Windows, if those people are still on a Windows phone. VoiceOver for iOS, volume control, haptic keyboard, visual, auditory and vibrational notifications, text-to-speech, speech recognition, Zoom, and 100 more. There are others, things like font size, touch and hold delay, screen rotation, high contrast, assisted touch, etc. And WCAG 2.1 doesn't really look at these at all. And so this was one of the reasons why at the end of 2018, the committee decided that it would continue to develop the guidelines, and we went into a lot more detail and we released the accessibility methodology at the end of 2019. We felt that they were required because WCAG 2.1 didn't go far enough. One of the things that WCAG 2.1 does do is require the accessibility of page variations. For example, low vision users who use the zoom function inherent in the browser on desktop are often restricted to a mobile view of the site on the desktop. As you increase text size on desktop, you get to a point where most sites turn into the mobile version of the site. As part of WCAG 2, zooming to 200% should already be included in regular testing and therefore not included in this methodology, which I'll talk about in a moment. But one of the things that WCAG 2 said was that it was absolutely essential that functionality is not removed due to a variation in the page. I'll give you an example of this. This is previously in YouTube. It's now been fixed. The upload and notification buttons were visible at 100% screen size, but not at 200%. So this means that people that were browsing at 200% screen size would not be able to upload a video or view their notifications. This is just show you the example here. Upload and notifications are visible here at 100%, and at 200% they're gone, and there's no other way to access them. Now, the reason that occurs is because people who were building YouTube at the time assumed that if you were looking at a mobile version of the site, you were doing so on mobile, and therefore if you wanted to upload a video, you'd use the YouTube app as opposed to the YouTube website. Another thing that WCAG 2 requires is accessibility supported. So basically implementation techniques that support assistive technology used on mobile devices such as TalkBack, VoiceOver and switch control. What does that mean for mobile? It means that testing really needs to be conducted, especially on native apps, with the mobile features inherent with a mobile device. So let's talk about the methodology. Now, the methodology includes the things that you need to test on mobile, some things that you need to test on desktop, but it doesn't include the things that you need to test under WCAG 2. So this methodology, for example, doesn't require that you add alt attributes to images because we assume that you would do that with WCAG instead. So you need to test with WCAG and with this methodology. The one thing that I'd like you to take away from today is that you must test with real devices. A lot of errors that we see are down to the fact that people aren't using real devices in real locations, they're using a simulator. This is one example. Back before COVID, when I used to travel a lot, we'd often land at LAX and you could actually access the LAX Wi-Fi from the tarmac, which was great until I got to this page, which was the LAX International Airport Wi-Fi internet access. This page will redirect, so content doesn't really make sense to have here. So all of a sudden, I don't really want to give you my credit card details. So it's important that you test with real devices. So let's talk about the testing methods for mobile sites, which are slightly different to the testing methods for native apps. There are 4 main testing methods for mobile testing. The first is testing on devices. The second is testing with devices and their assistive technology or mobile feature. So turning on Zoom, turning on TalkBack or VoiceOver, etc. Then there's also responsive window, which is testing on desktop on a responsively sized window, and then testing on desktop. So it's the 4 main testing methods in mobile sites. In native apps, there's only 2 main testing methods, which is testing with devices and testing with devices with assistive technologies. Yes, there are some automated accessibility testing tools that can test native apps, but as a committee, we keep an eye on them and we really think that they haven't grown to a point where they can be reliable. So we didn't include them in our methodology. So let's talk about the methodology itself. Now, the methodology for the mobile site and native app are very similar with the exception of step 2. So for the mobile site testing methodology, there are 5 steps. Step 1, identify devices. Step 2, identify site type and variations. Step 3, test critical issues. Step 4, test mobile specific issues. Step 5, test mobile assistive technology and feature support. For native apps, everything is exactly the same except for step 2, which is define application functionality. And just to re-emphasize, you need to test all of WCAG 2 as well as this mobile testing methodology. We did include all the 2.1 requirements in the mobile testing methodology. That's because there are some organisations that require WCAG 2 compliance and want to be accessible to mobile, and therefore we wanted to include 2.1 in there because there are some great things there. But it's very clear in the methodology what's a 2.1 requirement. So if you tested that already in previous testing, you can then kind of ignore it in this testing. We also have some exclusions and some differences between WCAG 2.1 and our methodology. One of them, for example, is that you shouldn't shouldn't have to scroll horizontally to access content on a mobile device. However, there's an exception in WCAG 2.1, and the exception is for images and tables and videos. And we say in our methodology that those are not viable exceptions. You need to meet the requirements for those for images, tables, and videos as well. So keep an eye out on them.
I'm just going to briefly show you where you can find these guidelines. So if you go to the Accessibility Oz website, and then under resources, there is mobile testing option here, and they're all Word documents. So here you've got just the methodology, so just the test cases. Then you've got about mobile site testing. So talks about devices in more detail, assistive technologies, site types, variations of the page, and how to capture errors. Then we've got the critical test cases, and they all have past examples. And then the actual mobile test cases, which also have past examples and step-by-step instructions. And then you've got the assistive technology and mobile features. So we've got the same for the native apps.
So thank you very much. I hope you have found this presentation useful, and hopefully we will all experience a more accessible time.
Ali Bytes 2021.